Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Etate sarvam akyatmatam yat prishto ham ihatvaya tat komare hari kritam hogande parikirtitam kiritam. Etate sarvam adyatam yat prishto ham ihatvaya tat komare hari kritam hogande parikiritam. Etat, this, te, unto you, sarvam, all, akyatam, described, yat, which, prishta, requested, aham, I, iha, in this regard, Tvaya, by you, tat, that, komare, in his early childhood, up to the end of his 5th year, Hari Kritam, performed by Lord Hari, Haugande, in later childhood, beginning with his 6th year, Padikiritam, glorified. Since you inquired from me, I have fully described to you those activities of Lord Hari that were performed in his 5th year, but not celebrated until his 6th. Etat suhridbish charitam murarer aghadanam sakpalajemanam cha vyakte tararupam ajor vistastvam srinvam grinan etinaro kilartan. Any person who hears or chants these pastimes, Lord Murari performed with his cowherd friends, the killing of Aghasura, the taking of lunch on the forest grass, the Lord's manifestation of transcendental forms, and the wonderful prayers offered by Lord Brahma, is sure to achieve all his spiritual desires. Purport. According to Srila Sanatana Goswami, even one who is only inclined to hear and chant the pastimes of Lord Krishna will achieve spiritual perfection. Many devotees seriously engaged in propagating Krishna consciousness are often so busy that they cannot chant and hear the pastimes of the Lord to their full satisfaction. However, simply by their intense desire to always chant and hear about Lord Krishna, they will achieve spiritual perfection. Of course, as far as possible, one should actually vibrate these transcendental pastimes of the Lord. Om Agyan Timid. Any person who hears or chants these pastimes Lord Murari performed with his cowherd friends, the killing of Aghasura, the taking of lunch on the forest grass, the Lord's manifestation of transcendental forms, and the wonderful prayers offered by Lord Brahma, is sure to achieve all his spiritual desires. We are reading this morning from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 14, entitled Brahma's Prayers to Lord Krishna, texts 59 and 60. The last several chapters that Shukadev Goswami has spoken were inspired by one simple question by Parikshit Maharaj. Parikshit Maharaj was deeply eager to hear Krishna's pastimes. He was cursed to die in 7 days when he was still quite young, at the prime of his career as the king of the world. And on the banks of the Ganga in North India, he vowed to fast until death. Not for the sake of fasting, but for the sake of giving his 100% full attention and energy to hearing the glories of the Lord, without the slightest distraction. And all the sages and rishis, understanding his motive, he was so eager, so determined to perfect his life in those 7 days, that Krishna in his heart sent the greatest and sages from all over the universe. Just like little Dhruva Maharaj, although a 5-year-old child, when he was crushed by his mother's words, his stepmother, Suruchi, he felt totally humiliated. Krishna tells in Gita, for a kshatriya who has been honored, dishonor is worse than death. Here he was in such a esteemed position. He was the son of a king, extremely powerful. And he had every type of luxury that can be imagined. But still, even in that situation, sufferings come. No one is exempt from suffering in this world. No one, whatever our position, can escape reversals. Greatness is how we respond to those reversals. Greatness is not about reversals not coming because we are so great. So despite his extremely exalted position as the prince and all the wealth and power that was his as a child, he couldn't find happiness in anything after his stepmother insulted him. And his father, he didn't say anything. He didn't agree with his stepmother. He didn't disagree with her. He just remained silent. And to Dhruva, that was total betrayal. The king Uttanapada, he did not consciously betray his son. If he had time to think about it, he would have likely acted differently. But it was one of those situations that just happened at the moment. His beloved son is trying to crawl on his lap. His very beloved favorite wife, due to her enormous ego of feeling privileged by his the king's affection, she spoke scornfully toward him. Well, this was quite a political situation as far as family matters go. If he would have said, "No, Dhruva, don't listen to that woman, come on my lap," then he would have been in big trouble with his stepwife, because he would have been completely defying her publicly in the pages of Srimad Bhagavatam. So he didn't want to do that, and at the same time he didn't want to hurt his son. So he didn't do anything. But his not doing anything to Saruchi confirmed that he is mine. He loves me the most. But to Dhruva, it meant that my father cares nothing for me anymore. He felt totally betrayed. Sometimes in this world, situations happen at the moment where we just may not think very carefully about what we do or what we say, and it has such results. For King Uttanapada, this was the greatest trauma of his life. Dhruva was so infuriated, so heartbroken, that he left his home, left his wealth, left his safety, and went deep into a jungle where nobody could find him. And after he left, Uttanapada was in total grief. What have I done? What a mistake. Why didn't I say something? How could I have been so cruel? He didn't mean it. He just made a very bad choice at a very, very traumatic moment. And he didn't have time to think about it after that, because within minutes, Dhruva was gone. And a similar thing happened to King Parikshit. He was the king of the world. He was extremely thirsty. He was in a forest. He went to a sage's house to get some water, and the sage was sitting in meditation. And King told him, "I'm here, I'm the emperor. At least give me water." And Parikshit Maharaj, just that one moment, he made a mistake. If he could have just thought about it, if he would have just thought about it, he would never have done this. His whole life he honored and worshipped the Brahmins and the rishis and sages. But in this situation, when he was extremely thirsty, he just misinterpreted the situation. He didn't want to make an offense. He was thinking that the person was ignoring him. Because sometimes Brahmins can be like that. That we're the greatest. Why should we wait on a king, a mere king? They should be at our feet. Samik Rishi was a pure soul. But in that moment of thirst, of trauma, he felt insulted by Samik Rishi. And in that moment, he took that dead snake with his bow and put it on Samik Rishi's shoulder. You're a Brahmin, here is your garland I offer you. Then he left. And as he was going home, he totally regretted what he did. But the reaction due to that situation was he was cursed to die in 7 days. For King Uttanapada, his little son going to the forest was worse than a curse of dying in 7 days, in one sense. He loved his son dearly. He didn't want to hurt him. He didn't mean to hurt him. But he did. In both cases, it's interesting, both Parikshit and Uttanapada, who were both emperors of the planet, they were both totally hurt by little children. Shringi was only about 5 years old, and Dhruva was only 5 years old. So here they are in the most powerful positions with great armies, great heritage, and so much pain caused by tiny little children. One leaves home, one curses. Uttanapada was beside himself with grief. And Parikshit Maharaj, he understood with a positive attitude, this is Krishna's blessing. In both cases, because they were both great devotees, Uttanapada and Parikshit, because they were both great devotees, the trauma became the greatest blessing of their lives. For Parikshit Maharaj, he left everything, went to the Ganga, vowed to fast, and Krishna saw how serious he was. How serious this man was, that he left everything just to hear about Krishna. There was such a sense of sharanagati, surrender. He was surrendering his life, his everything, just to hear about Krishna. And he was so eager. He wasn't feeling cursed, he was feeling blessed. And because of that situation, Krishna, in the heart of all the sages and the rishis throughout the world and the universe, he sent them all to be there. And ultimately, he sent Shukadev Goswami to speak Srimad Bhagavatam. And in the case of Uttanapada, his son Dhruva was so eager to find God that Krishna sent Narada Muni to enlighten him. And ultimately, when Dhruva came home, King Uttanapada was the happiest person in creation, because now not only was his son home and safe, but he was in Mahabhagavat. He was a self-realized, enlightened soul at 5 years old. So both of these traumas, where there was some regrettable mistakes became the greatest blessings because they were Krishna conscious. So Parikshit Maharaj, he was so eager to hear. Shukadev Goswami spoke throughout the day, every day, 9 cantos. How many of you have sat down all day, every day, and read, within, let us say, 4 or 5 days, 9 cantos? See? That's a lot of subject matter to sit and listen to. And now we're at the 10th canto. And Parikshit Maharaj is listening so carefully. It's not that he's just sitting there and okay, I vowed to fast till death and I'm going to hear until I die, so I'm just going to let these vibrations come in my mind and my heart until I die. He was every word. He was so thirsty, so hungry, so determined to hear, to process, to digest every single word of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And we find that the questions that Parikshit Maharaj asks throughout the Srimad Bhagavatam so deeply give us a sense of how he's listening. Shukadev Goswami tells how Krishna killed Aghasura. And in the flow of his narration, he said, but the killing of Aghasura was not spoken about in Vrindavan until 1 year after. And then Parikshit Maharaj continues on. Shukadev Goswami continues on. But Parikshit Maharaj inquires, how is that possible? Can you explain to me? If he killed Aghasura and liberated him in his Kumar age, why is it that it wasn't discussed until his Poganda age? Similarly, we read so many instances where Shukadev Goswami describes how the gopis and the cows of Vrindavan, they loved Krishna more than their own children. He just said that and was in the part of the narration. And Parikshit Maharaj said, wait, how is it possible for anyone to love somebody else's child more than their own? He was really listening. So in this case of Aghasura, Shukadev Goswami, he was so thrilled by these questions. He had already told Shukadev Goswami that because you are so eager to hear, you are empowering me to be eager to speak. And Srila Prabhupada explains, the transmission of transcendental knowledge is when the speaker is empowered to speak and the hearer is empowered to hear, and they are both empowering each other. Incredible. Sukadev Goswami is thanking Parikshit Maharaj for his enthusiasm because it's empowering him. That is how Krishna works. When someone is eager to hear about Krishna, in order to facilitate that person's hearing, Krishna sends somebody, and that devotee's desire to hear is so pleasing to Krishna that the Paramatma in the speaker's heart inspires the speaker to speak for that person's benefit. That's transparent via media. Sukadev was so eager to speak, he was enthusing Parikshit. Parikshit was so eager to hear, he was enthusing Shukadev Goswami. And this was going on moment after moment. Their eagerness was ever increasing. This was their loving relationship. And here, by the time the 10th canto comes, they're really eager. And Shukadev Goswami is so ecstatic to hear this question. You know, considering that Parikshit Maharaj had only 7 days to live, Shukadev Goswami could have just, rushed through, his narration and then, answer his question. And he has answered. He was so enthusiastic about this question. He goes in so much great detail to explain why. Vrindavan Das Thakur tells that if Lord Ganesh would write the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, even for an entire day of Brahma, and he's the most expert writer, he couldn't describe what Lord Chaitanya does in one day. If Anantashesha, with his many mouths, he has so many hoods and so many mouths, if he were to chant the glories of the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu for an entire day of Brahma, hundreds of mouths, he couldn't adequately describe what Lord Chaitanya does in one day. This is how the Lord performs his leelas. Shukadev Goswami tells us that when Krishna performed his Ras Leela on Sarat Purnima, it seemed like one night. One night is only, he began at sunset, and he and the gopis were all actually home before sunrise. So how many hours? Usually the sun sets about 6, it rises around, it's probably about 10 hours when it's dark between sunset and sunrise. But in that 10 hours, Krishna performed leelas for a day of Brahma, a whole night of Brahma, just billions of years. He performed that many pastimes in that 10 hours. It's an example. How do you describe it? Shukadev Goswami just describes a little tiny drop. Vrindavan Das Thakur tells in regard to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that trying to describe the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, it's like a little tiny bird trying to fly across the whole sky. How much of the sky can a bird cover? But whatever little distance, which is totally insignificant compared to the unlimited sky, the bird tries his best. That's all he could do. And Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami tells that in his explanation of Lord Chaitanya's Leela, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says the same thing to Rupa Goswami. In my explanation of Krishna, Krishna's pastimes, Krishna's qualities are like an unlimited ocean. An ocean that has no bottom and no shores. Unlimited ocean. And he said, all I could do is try to describe the quantity, the quality of one drop. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says that's all he could do, is describe one drop from this unlimited ocean. So for Shukadev Goswami, who is such a enlightened, empowered soul, son of Vyasadeva, can you imagine how many pastimes he knows? But whatever he knows is only a drop. And whatever he could speak in 7 days is only a drop within the ocean of what he knows, which is only a drop of what Krishna does. So he is extracting, what Krishna did in his leelas are unlimited. Imagine, Krishna was in Vrindavan for about 12 years performing leelas all day, every day. There's unlimited quadrillions upon quadrillions of leelas he did. That's God. He's Ananta. He's unlimited, inconceivable, achyuta, infallible, achintya. And Sukadev Goswami, he's describing these very, very precious pastimes that he has personally selected for Parikshit Maharaj. And he describes how Krishna, after killing Aghasura, was very hungry with his children, because that was quite a leela. These Yogamaya would somehow or other arrange for these asuras sent by Kamsa to come at very, very favorable times. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur tells that when Krishna and Gopas would play, their playing was so ecstatic that it would be impossible for them to stop playing. It was just too wonderful. But at the same time, Yashoda Mai and all of the elder gopis, they had prepared lunch in packages. Prabhupada said tiffins for the boys to go out to have in the cowherd pastures. And Yashoda Mai's food cannot go wasted. And ultimately Krishna wants to taste the food of his mother, and his mother wants him to taste his food for her food because of nourishment and enjoyment. So demons would come right in the middle of the summit of their play, and their play was always at a summit, from beginning to end. Just so the play would stop and there would be something else to do, and in the process of dealing with these incredible asuras, it would really make their appetite extremely enlivened. And so they were hungry for the food of their mothers. And their mothers, they would cook with a hunger to please their children. So everything, even though in the pasture grounds the Sakya Ras was so ecstatic, still the Vatsalya Ras was going on so deeply. They would all come and take the love of their mothers, and all the mothers' love for Krishna, especially Yashoda Mai. So as they were sitting down on the bank of Yamuna to take their prasad, Lord Brahma, he came down to see, how is this that little Gopal has killed Aghasura? And he was hearing all the other devas, because they feared Aghasura. He was such a dangerous person. The demigods were petrified with fear of this demon. He was unconquerable. And little Gopal not only did he kill him, but he gave him liberation in the spiritual world as one of his eternal associates. So when the demigods saw this, they were playing drums and singing and celebrating, and Brahma came down to see, what is this celebration? And he wanted to test, who is this Gopal? He was bewildered. At that split moment, he was bewildered. He wanted to see, what is this Krishna? So he kidnapped all the calves and all the cowherd boys. And Krishna, just to give even more pleasure to everyone through this pastime, he made what Brahma was thinking was going to be a great reversal for the whole Vrindavan. For 1 year, he was taking them away. And he came back down after a year to see how much trouble he caused. But when he came down, he saw everything was exactly the same. And he's the creator. How thorough Krishna is in his lila. He expanded himself as every calf. And there were millions and millions of calves. We can't even count. It describes at the beginning of the chapter of Aghasura, when Krishna and his gopas were going out, there was unlimited calves practically. Millions and millions and millions. Hare Krishna. And he expanded as each and every one of them. And each and every boy. So thorough was his expansion. They were all Krishna. That for the whole year, not a single mother cow had the slightest thought that this is not my child. Not a single elder gopi or gopa, mother or father, for 1 year had the slightest thought that this is someone else. Their bodies were replicas. Not only their bodies, but all of their characteristics, their emotions, the sound of their voice, the way they talked, all their desires. Parents know the desires of their little children. Every single desire was a replica of their child. The things they talked about were replicas of their child. Their relationships with them, their memories of what happened in their household were replicas of their children. The only difference is they didn't even question it. It was just a reality. They loved their children infinitely more than they ever loved their children before. They loved their children exactly the way they loved Krishna. But now Krishna had become their child, but they had no conception that this is Krishna. Even though their love increased infinitely, still, Krishna was so convincing to be their children that they just loved their children more than ever before, but never questioned why. Now, Brahma is the creator. This is a higher level than being a parent. The parent is like Mahavishnu is creator. And then Brahma is like a secondary creator. And parents are like a secondary, third-dairy, I don't know what it's called. Parents are down the line as creators. They're coming in that hierarchy of creators. So Brahma, he knows his creation. He has 4 heads. He's seeing all 4 directions thoroughly. And even as the creator of the universe, Brahma saw all the calves and all the gopas, and he couldn't understand that they were all Krishna. They were so exact replicas. Beyond replicas, they were Krishna. He was totally bewildered. He couldn't understand that it was Krishna. And he couldn't understand that all these children who he had, stored away somewhere, they were there in their mystic slumber, and at the same time they were all playing with Krishna. How is this possible? Brahma was bewildered. He became so bewildered that he couldn't talk. He couldn't even move. He became like a statue. He was so stunned. And then Krishna manifested every child as 4-armed Vishnu, with all great demigods and sages worshiping each one. Brahma saw that. He became even more totally bewildered. And then all the Vishnus disappeared. Millions of Vishnus. Just to see one form of Vishnu is the perfection of life. Brahma was seeing millions of them. And around each Vishnu was so many great souls worshiping. And all the Vishnus disappear, and all that's left is little Gopal with his yogurt, dahi, and fruit mixture in his hand. Exactly as he was 1 year before. And incredible. The fruit salad was still perfectly fresh. Yogurt sitting in someone's hand for 1 year. It's fruit. It's going to, you know how fruit is. It's not that, there was refrigeration to keep it fresh. Everything was just so perfect. It was this, and it wasn't like a new fruit salad that Krishna. Everything was exactly as it had been a year before, when Krishna was just innocently looking around for his calves and his friends. And this bewildered Brahma the most. And it was at that point that he realized what it means that God is great. It was at this point that he, in his total humility, that I am nothing. He gave the example that when a firefly is on a moonless night, he gives off his light and thinks, I am lighting up the whole sky. Now, if you just try to understand this analogy from the perspective of a firefly, it's actually quite instructive. Because our perception of the entire creation is so relevant or relative to our particular state of consciousness. How many of you have ever looked closely at a firefly? Please raise your hand. You've seen fireflies. You have them in India, yes? Where they go and they light up. Anyways, I've done my little studies after this, reading Brahma's prayers. show me with your fingers, what is the size of a firefly's eyes? Can you do it? Can't even make it small enough. They're only this big, and their eyes are tiny, tiny little eyes. So how much can those eyes see? You know, your eye is much bigger. Your one eyeball, if we want to get analytically, is probably hundreds of times heavier than a firefly's entire body. Yes? Your one eyeball probably has the weight of thousands and thousands of fireflies. So what is the size of one firefly's eye? It's tiny. So how much can that little eye see? Can't see that much. So in the night, when the firefly, and it's the male fireflies that have the light, when they go bzzz, and the light goes bzzz, and they can't keep it for very long. You see fireflies, they go bzzz, bzzz, bzzz. I've told the story before at Gita Nagari, you know, when I was with Bhakti Tirtha Swami Maharaj. The place I was staying, Yadunandan Prabhu and Taruni Devi's home, it's kind of in a very, very quiet agricultural fields and forests around their house. And when I would come to their home, you know, I would come back at night sometimes, being with His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Swami Maharaj, and there were hundreds and hundreds of fireflies in this field, just near a forest. And they were just pss, pss, pss. It was like fireworks. It was incredible. The lights were just tsh, 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 tsh. It was supernatural. It was so natural. Supernatural, natural. So I just sat there and I was looking and thinking, this is just incredible. It's a nature. It's a whole light show in the sky. Bzz, 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 bzz. And Yadunandan Prabhu, he comes and we're watching together. And he said, do you know why they're doing that? And I said, I don't know, but it's beautiful. He said, when the males want to attract the females, they put off their light in order to mate the females, to attract the females to mate with them. I said, why did you have to tell me that? You know, I'm a sannyasi and I'm, brahmachari, and I'm not supposed to be watching, males attracting females to have sex. You just ruined everything. I thought they were just, just celebrating life or something like that. So anyways, I went to sleep after that. But those little fireflies, because they have such little tiny eyes in the darkness, when they let off that light, as far as their eyes could see, they're lighting up the whole sky. They really seem that they're lighting up the whole sky, because they can't really see beyond that light that they can't see the darkness beyond their light. It's just all around them, the light. Ah, look, I'm lighting up the universe. But when the sun comes out, bzz, 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 they can't make any difference anywhere. There's just no difference. So similarly, Brahma said, in ignorance of you, in darkness, only in darkness do I think that I'm a great person. But in the light of knowledge, I realize I'm insignificant. How great are you, Krishna? So this ahankar, this ego, can only exist in the darkness of ignorance. Where there's light, Krishna Suryasa Maya Hoya Andhakar. Srila Prabhupada would love to quote Lord Chaitanya's words, that Krishna is like the sun and Maya is like darkness. Where there is the sun, darkness cannot be. So when we actually have some experience of Krishna, a real experience, that light of Krishna's presence, if we're actually experiencing, we will become totally humbled by that experience. People could talk about Krishna. People could quote verses of Krishna. People could speak all sorts of philosophy and everything. But if they're proud, that means they're not in the light. They're still in darkness. Ego can only exist in darkness, where we think I'm great. But when we actually experience Krishna's greatness, even Brahma considered himself insignificant. What is our position? Brahma lives 311 trillion years and never gets old. Never gets sick. Incredible personality. He knows all the Vedas. He spoke all the Vedas. Yes, most balls are made out of either leather or they're made out of plastic or rubber, which is all oil stuff. They're not organic. How many organic balls do you have? Yes. What is it? Soccer, what is it made out of? Anyways, they were using fruits, amalaki fruits. And they were playing all sorts of ball games with the fruits. Just like any little boy. Jumping and playing. And usually Krishna would lose. He would wrestle. And Sri Ram's just a little cowherd boy. Sri Rama would defeat him. And they played one game when Pralambasura was there, and they did two teams, Krishna's team and Balaram's team, and whose team lost? Anyone? Say loud. Say Krishna's team lost. So how many of you would be happy to be glorified forever as losing? Yes? For all of eternity, Krishna is glorified for losing the game. Yes? He's glorified for losing wrestling matches, for losing games. It's like ordinary child. It captures our hearts. That is Vrindavan. Krishna is totally accessible, totally approachable. For Brahma, he was very afraid to approach Krishna. Indra was extremely afraid to approach Krishna. But the cowherd boys are jumping on him. They're jumping on his back when they're like monkeys, and he's jumping on their backs. There's no afraid. Yes, the cows are licking him, and the calves are jumping with him. Even in Vrindavan, the frogs and the peacocks, nobody's afraid of Krishna. He's their best friend. Very melodious. That is some divine signal that class should end. this beautiful Vrindavan Leela is Shukadev Goswami inviting us to our eternal home. This is our eternal home, beyond the birth and death of this material world. And I will conclude with news that I received this morning. Very, very heartbreaking news. All of our very, very dear, beloved friends, Shyam Das. Do you all remember he came here? He came to India 1973, just after I left. And after I left, he became best friends with Asim Krishna Das Ji. He became initiated devotee in the Pushti Marg. Became a great, even though born in Connecticut from Jewish parents. His mother was a state senator, very exalted, educated lady. He made his residence in Vrindavan, became a great Sanskrit scholar, translated so many literatures from Sanskrit to English, became an incredible singer. He learned Drupada singing, Drupada drumming. He learned classical ragas. In fact, he established kirtan in the whole yoga community of the Western world, more than anyone. And he always taught pure bhakti. He was an incredible personality. And always serving. He just loved to serve. Such an open heart. And he loved all the devotees here so much. He was incredibly connected with all sorts of people all over the world. Some very, very influential. And he would love to speak about his experience at Radha Gopinath Temple. He just saw so much beauty and sweetness in the devotion of everyone here. And in his own life, for all these years, he has a beautiful little home just about 10-second walk from Govardhan Hill, where he spends over half the year for the last 40 years. He either lives in Gokula or Jatipuram. When he goes to the west, he spreads kirtans and spreads pure bhakti in such an incredible, beautiful way. And love to chant, love to speak about Vrindavan and Krishna, and love to serve everyone and anyone. And inspired so many people to love Krishna. But last night, he passed away from this world in a motorcycle accident. He was supposed to be here for our Pushabhishek festival this year. He was planning to be here for 3 days with us, just next week. In fact, this week, he was supposed to come this week. So this is a great, great loss to the hearts of thousands and thousands of people. Great loss to my heart. And his devotion, his faith, his seva, we know for sure that his immortal soul, which is so beloved by Sri Radharani and Srinathji, every day practically he spent hours doing his puja for his Srinathji deity. Wherever he was in the world, he would put everything aside, spend a few hours cooking for them, bathing them, serving them so beautifully, and chanting the holy names. So let us offer a heartfelt prayer to Sri Sri Radha Gopinath, offering our sincerest gratitude for the association they gave us with Shyamdas Ji Prabhu, and a sincere prayer for Sri Sri Radha Gopinath, Srinathji, to bless his immortal soul, with their desire to uplift his soul to the spiritual world, Goloka. Let us pray for all blessings upon him, and let us offer our gratitude for all he's done for us in the world. In his honor, 3 times let us raise our arms and loudly chant the Hare Krishna mantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Shyamdas Ji ki jai. Thank you very much.